administration. Again, I have not been informed of any. There are none. We will do. Thank you. We will do the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting 22nd of February. Someone wants to move that they be adopted as an accurate record. Oh, thank you. Paul, seconded. Lyndall, their accuracy is open for discussion. Are there any omissions or errata?
No, but I do have a question. Ask a question?
Ask a question and I'll decide whether it's an order.
Just in item 9.1 on page 7, regarding the wide sooner, regular updates to council. Just wondering if we've got a plan of those regular updates yet. Yet being the operative word.
Yeah. Yes. It is the intention to update council through the Regional Services Committee, the trust, the meetings with the Waituna Trust, and there is also a paper that's coming just above a status update of the trust in terms of what it is. So that's due to happen probably the next council meeting, but there will be a regular trust update through the services.
Satisfied with
Yes,
the.
thank you.
Oh, any other questions or? All right, I'll now put the motion. The minutes be adopted. Those in favour say aye. No.
Aye.
Item 6, notification of extraordinary urgent business. Not been informed of any. Item 7, questions. Not been informed of any. Item 8, reports. Does anybody have a report? Yes, Nicole.
Well, that's a bit of a prompting from Lyndall, but we had the Waituna meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the paper that's coming may well would have to actually probably go to either full council. It needs to be approved by full council. So we're in the process of revisiting the constitution and the membership. The project with finance from government does officially sort of come to a close at the 30th of June. So there will be some work going on. There's been a suggestion that the trust at the moment we have 2 representatives on it. Suggestion is that we downsize the trust to be 1. And the other request that I have made in that report is, while the funding will not be at the level it's been in the past, as to whether each of the entities are prepared to put any funding and actually keep the thing going. So that is something that needs to come to either a committee of full council, which would be Stratton Policy, or to the ordinary meeting of council.
Thank you. That do have something to add?
No, disagreeing with
Nodding affirmation.
yeah.
And then I'll say a bit more that's positive about it. I mean, it is coming to the end of a project with quite a diverse group of people, and it has been the rest of people. You know, we went through the process the other day of what we could have done differently, or a few things we've learned along the way. But of all those freshwater projects, I suspect that the Waituna one is right up there, and it's a credit to all the people that have been involved.
Thank you. Okay, Chair, you have a report?
Yes, I've already put it on the course last week, but probably best to also be on a meeting with on the 2nd with ES staff, 4 representatives from Wakatari, looking at gravel extraction under the Mararoa, stone bridges. There are limitations in that they can only extract 15 metres below and above each bridge. So
How much? 15 or 50?
50 metres above and below each bridge. It was noted that there's a serious build up under the Mararoa, probably 3 out of the 6 partitions full of cement. At one stage, one of them, you almost have to get on your knees. You're still not prepared to get under the increase in cementation. So I did ask for a time frame, didn't get one. Hoped for one,
You're on the case.
but I wasn't on the case.
Well, thank you. Any other reports? I would like to move reports be received. Thank you, Lyndall. Second, Pete. Put the motion, all those in favour, say aye. Aye. So we come to agenda item 9, item 1, Southern Pest Eradication Society update, and hands to Matt. You doing that? Thank you. Talk to us.
I'll take the report as read, but I just want to make one correction there. In terms of our next steps there, we're doing this survey to ascertain community interest and the feedback around this. I did say there we were going to run some drop-in sessions, but since the writing of this report, in discussion with our comms team, we decided that's not, that the drop-in sessions won't take place at this time. Possibly something to look at as part of our long-term plan going forward. But that's the only there. The thing that's special about this, that most of you will be aware, is quite unique amongst Southland in terms of the way this is organised. The rest of Southland, and I understand most of New Zealand, river control is really a landowner's responsibility in its own right. So this is a unique way of dealing with this, but it's a community interest.
Okay, questions?
I'd say that the area is instinct. A little area of selling. We're doing this as a trial. Where we're looking at cost benefit of it.
Yeah, so this was initially, so in the background, it was something that came around as all the road around this particular group got together. It was something that was an agreement put in place with we collect rates on their behalf, and then they'd just go and do it. There was no real formal accountability or anything around that. A few years ago, we did a review of that, found out that we needed to bring this up to a more modern contract or service. At the same time, we were looking at as to whether this needed to continue this way. So we did a survey last year amongst the ratepayers in that area to ascertain whether they wanted to continue and look into this, and there was an overwhelming response to support this. There's still a small group that were opposed. So it's if this community want to continue it this way, that's what we look at doing, is working with the community to do so.
That's good. Then you did say that you know, private owners, property owners are responsible. They're not just on private property. As well, and everyone's in that.
Yeah.
And they come from the other elements, they're not administered. I mean, it's a huge issue. Stevens Farm. Other areas, as an example, the long grass here in front of in front of the golf club. It's just a huge habitat that no one even remotely looks at. And the neighbouring properties are trying to manage the issue themselves. It's just a breeding. Yeah, we're all going on here.
Yes, just in response to Paul's question, this eradication program has gone on for a long time. As a result of that survey, it was reinstated probably a few changes, making sure the health and safety is up to scratch. And I guess, a lot of people long term would actually like to see the tests extended, possibly other things. And it's probably different times of year, but we have our own PCAs that do quite an effective job. And I guess long term, when it goes with it, it would be quite good to be able to. And when we're looking at predator free 2050, it would be actually becoming more than the traditional. But it was an exercise in democracy. We had areas out in the world. And senators are also passionately against it, but that's life.
No,
Thanks, Chairman. I'm quite excited by the formulation of the app. It seems quite useful and quite modern.
Yes.
Even vivid. Well, but the last sentence there is that you're waiting a progress report. So that about how the effectiveness of the app, or whether, or is it a
Sorry,
report about?
their quarterly report. Right. It's part of the contract.
So we've obviously got to go to LTV discussions. So when will we get, I don't want to use the term return on investment, but
Yes.
you know what I mean. Reports so that we see where the value add is in this areas and no, will that come
That will come as part
at
of
the end of this financial year?
It'll certainly the survey results and then we're through on that, but also we're also Craig's he's managing the contract with Spence for us. So we will also be doing a review of their effectiveness. Yeah, are they actually building up to it? So as you've indicated, it's fair to say that Spence are potentially we were behind in terms of modern day looking at things. So that's where we come in. The community wanted this, so we're working to support that. And but really at the end of that comes down to what they deliver.
Yeah, and being the app is one of those tools we use for reporting, I think, plus also help manage the contractors on the ground. And it should lead into these reports.
Yeah, quite good.
Yeah,
It's working on.
yeah, and then as part of that long-term plan, we would look at various options about how this could potentially move forward. Yeah, and what it will.
Thank you.
I think it might be great other species. Well, that's something we look at as well.
I'm not sure whether I should be more involved, but I was an EP. Rabbit board was more into the catchment board, and a group of very focused people from that area were came to point out to me that the sand dune country that runs around the coast is mother lode when it comes to rabbits multiplying, and they were just so loath to see that go. And I suggested something after the form of the Commodity Levies Act, which is Parliament, but try and see if you can operate something under the council. So I'm probably initially responsible for the first approach here. But a lot of those people that were farming in that area actually won their farms from the rabbits that come back. And so there is a real feeling there that could happen again if there wasn't adequate control of rabbit in that area. And that's why you have that very strong sentiment. Let's defeat these little critters, keep them out.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it is that level that controlling the rabbits is something we but we've got that right previously.
I think Morrison.
Oh, Morris, sorry, didn't see you. Morris, go. Have you unmuted? You might like to unmute.
Right, there we go. Eric, you shouldn't have asked me because of what I was going to say was sort of completely opposite to what you've just been saying. And I wonder why we have this particular area in just one part of Southland that's not particularly rabbit prone, except perhaps for the coastal strip. There are other coastal strips in Southland, like between Invercargill and Riverton, which are sandy and similar. It seems a bit inconsistent, not quite the right word for having a particular area here when other more rabbit prone areas such as northern Southland, for example, don't have one, and people have to look after the rabbits themselves.
Paul, Paul, voice of wisdom, please.
So I think it's, I think in order to answer that, Councillor Broadway, I think we need to recognise the historical arrangement of the Southern Pest Eradication Society and the history that's had as potentially a difference from how we manage rabbits through the pest management plan, which is alluded to mainly landowner responsibility. So this is a slightly different to that approach. Council acknowledged that there was community support around some form of continuation, but we needed to ensure that if we continued, that we had support from the community. So this represents a community wanting to respond to rabbit control in a certain way. The council resolved to do that with a review, obviously all things are reviewed around an LTP, which is the key, which will be a key point to council then to determine whether rabbit rates in this area will continue. I think the purpose of this paper, whilst it's an interesting and wide ranging topic, because it's been part of council for the subject's been around in 1994, long time, is that we, as part of that consultation, some of the feedback around, I was using Councillor Ludlow's words, the effectiveness of the contracts and making sure that what people who are paying the rate are getting a return on. We've got a contract, we've got contract reporting, but also what we thought was going to be important was satisfaction, around that contract. So that's why this update to the committee reported that we will undertake a satisfaction survey to make sure that involves not only us but also the contractor as they progress through into the next stage. So that's the purpose of it.
Councillor Rob, in the last term, in the latter part of the last term, all the questions you raised did appear before the wider council, and whether or not we should permit this to continue, and certain requirements were made, the ones all made about satisfaction, having another poll to see if they still wanted it, and dealing with issues of health and safety, which were a concern of our chief executive at the time. We're all countenanced and worked over, and that's why we've got it now. And this report doesn't require any action other than for us to receive the report, which is an action coming out of that, well, you might say, re-established process. And so if there's no further discussion, move. Yeah, move Nicholson before I put the motion that the report be noted. Those in favour would say aye, against no, that's agreed. Thank you. And we come to item 2, which is research and biodiversity operations division update, January to March, in the hands of who's doing, you doing it? Paul.
Catherine.
See you.
Catherine, if you've not had the opportunity to introduce yourself, that might be.
Thanks about it, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. So I'm stepping in for Ali Mead while she's on holiday until the middle of July. My animal portfolio is marine biosecurity and biodiversity. So today we'll cover over the general operational stuff for the whole team, and I have Jolie and Dave here as well, just to call on if there's any query questions in the terrestrial space. So I'll just accept the paper as read and highlight a few of the key points from the quarter January to March. A really positive thing is the community engagement and the organisational vibe work that happened during that quarter. So Polly's team in the biodiversity space, they've managed to set up the biodiversity forum again, which is agencies and interested individuals and staff working in the biodiversity space. The whole point of that group is to just improve communication across the organisations and sort of have an integrated management approach. So that fell away during COVID and staff changes, so really exciting that works off the ground again. There's also a biodiversity technical group that's been set up within ES in that quarter as well. So again, just interested people from all of the teams at ES working together to try and achieve those biodiversity outcomes. Jolie's team also had weed consultation workshop, which has been in the community space, and that was really well received, and I believe they've had a few incidents and reports and things, so great to see the community engaged in that space. In terms of pest animals, we had a new possum control area introduced, which was in Pukaro, and you'll see reference to the paper there, there's another one underway for Balfour as well, so ongoing work around increasing that program. In terms of marine work, we have had the Jobs for Nature team working on doing wider surveying across Fiordland in response to the dust sound under area inclusion that you probably heard about last year in November. So really exciting work there. It's the first time we've been able to do full surveys of Fiordland. They managed to cover 175 kilometres of coast, so that's what they swum, and they did over 355 survey drives. So yeah, really cool. We didn't find any new marine sites, so our management sites remain in Chalky Inlet, which is no under areas been found since November 2019. So we're just monitoring that site. And obviously, Breaksea Sound, we have our primary management site as well as the New Justice Sound one. Reports, we had a couple of wallaby sightings, which Dave can give a bit more detail on if you're interested, and Jolie's team as well, responding to a couple of old man's beard reports. Finally, you'll just see at the bottom there, there's a bit of a reference to the Jobs for Nature program. So this is reported through a different committee, but just to note there that we do have 3 projects wrapping up in June 2023, and then 2 of our biodiversity ones will continue on into 2025.
Presuming there may be some questions about the wallabies, could we have a report on the site?
Thank you with that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was 2 sightings, as Catherine reports. The first one was from members of the public, Kiwi tourists. They, after 9 days, were informed that they should report the wallaby sighting. Their sighting was that they hit the wallaby while travelling on the road between Riverton and Manapori, and they thought it was about 20 minutes north of Riverton. So that gave us a huge scope of road to check, which we did. But after 9 days, obviously, if it had been a wallaby, good chances were that it was probably lying off the side of the road in the long grass or scavenged or whatever. So needless to say, we didn't find anything on that. Credible report, but may not hold a lot of water. So we think that offers investigated. The other wallaby report was actually from the Otago region, but it has significance for us because it's only 5 or 6 k's from their boundary, regional boundary, and headwaters of the Tomahaka River. So our action there was just to talk with a couple of the neighbouring farmers or station holders on our side of the boundary. And the actual inspections were undertaken by Otago Regional Council contractors using a variety of methods over several man days with nothing found. But it was deemed to be a credible report by the farmer. And yeah, again, pretty close to their boundaries. So unfortunately, they may or could be getting closer. We are getting closer. So we do have a response plan that hasn't been tested yet, but that they may be getting closer.
Or
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the modern day era that we live in, with people attached to these, we have a report put in 9 days after it happened, which is quite lucid, and especially the road between Riverton and Manapori. The station was someone would have stopped and taken a photo. Starting to sound almost a little like a brief sighting.
You just to clarify further, that report was actually during the darkness. It was like 5:30 in the morning. They left Riverton pretty early. So again, it could have been a hare, it could have been a fawn, could have been a calf or anything like that. But they have spent time in Australia, so they know what kangaroos, wallabies look like. So they seem pretty confident. But yeah, they didn't deem it as significant until it was sort of told to them after 9 days. That is significant, it should be reported. And once they did it via the NPI website, which is the preferred method of reporting. And that report gets pinged to myself straight away as soon as it's entered, and it gives a location. But unfortunately, the location in this chance was just adopted before the map, thinking it's somewhere in that area.
Just on that, were they clear that it was actually alive, or were they just going?
No, the report was that they deemed it was alive. What they said was that that was almost a fly height, even though they had a small car, so that's still a couple of feet off the ground. They didn't see whether it had a tail or not, but again, they clarified that they knew what wallabies looked like and were pretty certain.
No,
Thanks, Chair. Will they have a rental car or their own? Because I ask because if it's a rental, then maybe there's some education in that rental space that we need to do so that if tourists do come across the likes of the animal, they know to have reported it immediately.
Yeah, good point. I didn't clarify that, but it may have been why after 9 days it was reported, because it might have been the rental company that perhaps told them they should, the insurance company.
Yeah, so maybe the rental companies need to be made aware of, you know, what's in the car or something to report.
I don't think there's any doubt that their territory is expanding. And they're now on the south side of the Waitaki. We know that, so it's not a lot to stop them. There's reports of while we run over on the road 2 years ago at Chingle Creek. And I went to Cromwell between Christmas and New Year, and there was a dead wallaby lying on the side of the road, about 5k this side of Roaring Creek. But a dead one could have fallen off a truck or a ute. But it was definitely a wallaby. I backed up and had a look at it.
Yeah, I think we've had 10 instances of wallabies in Southland. 5 of those are deemed roadkill, so found on the side of the road, just as you're explaining. And we deem those probably have come from further north, Waimea, wherever, and been dumped off the truck or fallen off the truck.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask a question about the Pukerea Possum Initiative? What's the driver of that? Is it because of TB, or is it just environmental concerns, or what's the driver there with that?
Mr. Chair, there's a series of reasonings behind when we set up PCA, environmental, economic, TB threat, things like that. And this one sort of ticked quite a few of those boxes. It used to be in the bovine TB vector control area, so it has had a history of formal possum control, albeit sort of 10, 15 years ago. Very good buy-in from the farmers wanting this coordination and support, and it is really one of the bigger drivers was that it is an extension of a current PCA area, so it's just adding on and growing program. It's not an isolated area, it's just continuing to grow the program.
Thank you. Any other questions in the report? No. Some resolution that we know, thank you, Paul. Second, Bindle. Motion made in favour, it's aye. Thank you. Oh, Morris, could I missed you again?
No, I was just, oops. I was just agreeing with the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Good. Sorry, I need to look at my screen more often. And you're a very member and you make a quorum, which makes you even more very today.
You know, I'm still here.
Item 3, catchment integration division update. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So from the catchment integration team, obviously I'll take the report as read. I need to correct an error. So on page 20, freshwater farm plan, for reasons that I'm recall, the first councils at this point in time are Southland and Waikash, not Southland and Otago. So please note that is an error. And it is Southland and the Waikato that are being put forward by NZ is the first tranche, if you like, the first phase of the implementation. So I'll just kind of walk through some of the highlights in terms of the work we're doing. Councillors will be aware that we're quite involved with intensive integrating in the first quarter of the year, the calendar year. We work very proactively with the community, with farmers in terms of helping them understand the obligations they have both in the consent process, but also what that looks like in terms of on-ground action and how they set up with integrating paddocks. We've got a number of sites that we looked at through our proactive engagement and then followed up with, and we've got a amazing future discussions. We know that that's a very, very setting up for winter. So, and what farmers are doing at that time is really important in terms of successful integration. So, and now we do that, that thing where we sort of segue into compliance having in a leadership role around intensive winter grazing, because of the competing requirements. But we still sit very closely and we're in very close contact, in terms of where we're able to assist farmers to be making the right decisions. Obviously, we know there are a number of consents being applied for through the consenting team. We know that farmers are coming to terms with some of the requirements and the obligations that the new intensive winter grazing regulations bring. So that will continue through the winter, I expect. In terms of our riparian planting work, you'll see there at the start we're closing what we call the pilot, the Charlton Waiwumu project. So that is work that we did with farmers in that catchment to plant out 30,000 trees on, I think, about 25 properties, and we maintain a relationship with those farmers, and many of them are continuing on in terms of their riparian journey. And importantly, as I know has been raised in the past, one of the key contexts is around maintenance, because we know that it is only a small part of the job getting the plant in the ground. Actually, in Southland, getting it to grow and to form the buffer that we want, does take an investment, both particularly in terms of time. Actually, it is a financial investment, I acknowledge that, but time is the critical issue, making sure that there's a program, a regular program in place in terms of spraying and maintenance. The regional services field day. So the committee here met with the Catchment Liaison Committee and a range of Manawatu Whenua representatives and stakeholders. I think it's happy to answer questions on that. I think it was an enormously successful day. It followed the very excellent kind of format of having some time in the field to look at things and how they're working. But then we also, returned obviously to Winton, where we actually had firstly received, I guess, what you would call some technical information. Some, how can we think about this issue of gravel management, of river management from mountains to sea, a whole catchment approach to how we're working on these challenges, the connection. So obviously, we tend to focus on gravel, but it forms part of the catchment management process, and also how we're looking at climate change and so forth. So big direct connect to my colleague Randall and the catchment operations team and the work that they're doing, and we will continue to work closely to evolve that topic and the conversations that we started on that day. Just a quick join up in terms of the Enviro schools. So as part of the Charlton Waiwumu project, we're working with Hokanui Runner there. Councillors might recall that plants are sourced from the arrangements that they had with Milton and Matagal prisons. Part of that is a koha that will return to Enviro schools. So that's a sort of a circle, if you like, in terms of Enviro schools in the broader kind of Gore area, Gore and Eastern Southland area. So we're just working on setting that up. And one of the areas, the schools that we're working very closely with is Hedgehoe, who have been doing, Hedgehoe Primary, doing some phenomenal work in terms of their connection to Sherwood Forest, which I believe we've got a close connection to through our biodiversity biosecurity team, but also working very closely with Hokanui around some of the place-based education, history and schools. So it's something we'd like to share, work with Hedgehog and share a bit more of this information with councillors at another time, perhaps out in the field, because I think there's a lot of very interesting strands of work in terms of what we do coming together in that particular project. And I'll probably just leave it there. I'm happy to answer questions.
First question is from Paul.
Well, yeah, thank you. That was great. Question probably Nicola, not probably regarding hail sites in a certain situation to go out with a local game club. It says here that the majority of these sites, so we understand that how if there's a gun club operating prisons of lead, there's a hail certification from the site. And it says here which skeet or shooting which take place at fixed locations, dedicated ranges with confined shot full zones. We currently have a local shotgun club that don't have your own private and are willing to do a couple of national meets on private land, individually different private land. would that fall under this hail? There's not a fixed location for a dedicated page.
So I guess if I can just, through you, Mr. Chairman, back up around the wider conversation. So councillors will be familiar that there is a thing called the Hale site, the hazardous activities and industries list. It is a list of activities by which if we gather information, then what we do is we register it on our own council, on our regional council site, and that is then a risk of, there's an activity potentially that's happening on that place. In terms of the Tiana situation, we've worked through that with the particular people involved, and so I'm happy to kind of talk elsewhere about how that outcome has landed and how we're going to approach that. But certainly we have some, requirements that we are we have required to work through and to obliged to comply with. And then we work with landowners from a communication point of view around what that looks like and what that means, and understanding what is it to have a hail site on your property is a particularly important part of that conversation. But yeah, certainly we can. Thank you.
Thanks. Someone outside our scope, I guess, but the broader conversation about the shop is perhaps discouraging the likes of whichever clubs use it to not use. And I've become aware that there are actually quite good alternatives now, and so I'm not sure whether it's quite our purview to be encouraging clubs not to use it, but I wonder if there is a way.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, what we have learned is part of these discussions is that there certainly is a direction of travel towards non-lead. And clearly there are significant risks which are very hard to minimise. They're almost impossible to minimise when it comes to lead, particularly really around waterways, but even in terms of soils. However, we know that internationally, nationally, there is a direction of travel towards steel shot to be used. The challenge, and we know this very clearly, is in some of the competitions where that change hasn't been made yet. So we continue to encourage as strongly as we can. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, sorry, that is the national guidelines from the groups that operate these things on board with the world.
All right. Sorry, Morris. Yes.
Well, we can't hear you, Morris.
Morris, you're muted.
Oh, I have to mute, sorry. Right, I should be right now. I just wanted to thank Fiona and her team for organising the field trip with Ian Fuller and the trip to the river sites and the meeting at Winton. I thought it was really good, a good start to getting a better understanding of more holistic river management. Perhaps one or two people who could have been there weren't there, but can't do much about that. It was so. I just wanted to encourage you to continue. I'm sure you will to work along those lines that we started the other day. So thanks again, and thank you, Paul, too, for organising all of that.
Thank you, Morris. Nickel.
Yes, just on the plantings the Hedgehoe School were involved with. I had a couple of conversations recently about an area actually on my road in Elton Valley, which traditionally schools planted, and it's all been felled and looks pretty ugly actually. And actually came up with in the conversation afterwards. Because they've been doing a little bit of that work. But I understand there's also, most of this year, there is some government funding to do with the coronation. I'm just thinking there could be some synergies here for our environment schools in the area. Get back into what I used to raise that 5 years ago, and it was Little Clark Clifton School 1958. So there's been a tradition of Arbor Day plantings, and there's possibly some sources of funding where we could actually get children involved and probably come back and try to find the wheel and seeing how those plantings went.
No, and actually, if I can throw you, Mr. Chairman, a very strong example that is in my mind from the past is the work that the primary school that's up north of Bulla, planted on the banks of that was an Enviroschools Spring Gold project on the banks of the Mataura River, where those beautiful sort of riparian native planting is just adjacent to the bridge. I'm very sorry because the school has gone right out of my head. But we work very closely with them for many years, and that is an area where the trees have now been in place for probably 10 years and are well established, and that's a site. Sorry, my apologies to all and to the school. And then the other things, a couple of things I'd say is that's why we are, so there's wanting to support individual schools with their endeavours through the Enviroschools program at particular sites on their property. Then what we're trying to do is actually group together. So the Waihopai planting site that councillors will hopefully be familiar with is an area where we're trying to sort of focus attention and bring schools to, so that we can have sort of a deeper learning opportunity and have that relationship built in terms of the connection to the land and the plants that they've planted. And if you go upstream of that site, you know, when I started in the organisation 10 years ago, we worked out there with the local kindergarten planting trees, which are now, as I say, 10 years on and well established. I guess what I would comment on is that we have probably a conversation to come in the long-term plan, because what we are finding is there is a high level of enthusiasm for this type of work and not a lot of people other than us in the space. So, you know, just making a comment.
Okay, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to add on to Fiona, so I look after the education team. So just wanted to also add that we've now included for the calendar events for term 2, the events that the team working on this term into your council diaries. So those are all available and everyone welcome to come along. Those will be events as with the Waihopai, but there's also some other events around biodiversity, fashion, all sorts of bits and pieces happening this term. So if you have the opportunity to come and join us at any of those, you're welcome.
Thank you. But there's no further questions. Someone like to
Yep, I move the-
that one. You had a question or
No, I'm taking it.
you're saying it? Well, then what do say aye?
Aye.
It's no, it's agreed. We can provide 4 catchment operations commission update. Randall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, member councillors, good afternoon, everybody. So I think the report is read, just a few notes and updates for the councillors. In regards to the Mataura Gravel Island work, we're undertaking installation of some stem culverts to allow the contractors to get safe access to that site. They're actually arriving today, so that work will be underway very shortly. Mataura True Leaf rock line work is completed. I'd just like to acknowledge the staff effort for those involved, picking up that work on top of business as usual work program. As you can see by the photo, really high quality community asset. It's allowing us good access all year round. And really happy with the product that the local contractor delivered for us in the community. The Gore high trees, the stump grinding and fencing has been completed. The only remaining work is to remove the stumps at the end of the end of the bank remediation. So that work needs to be undertaken when the weather's more settled and we've got dry material to work with. We're coming to the end of the annual defects maintenance program. We're now preparing for the annual stopping inspections, which we're expecting to get underway in July. I've left the wire in the Te Anau Basin work in there. It's a very slow progress on this. All initiated, engaging Professor and Fuller last year to assist us with these trials. We've got a lot of gravel resource that's locked up under heavily vegetated gravel islands. We see that a work program that's to be built around that in the future to unlock those benefit the entire system. So we actually need the data and the science from these trials so that we can support future work programs and the consents that will be needed to deliver it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to questions.
Questions?
The ownership of the stock banks. Where does that lie now? We obviously ownership of the
So we have taken legal advice. The next steps is to meet with Southland District Council. We just go through that legal advice with their management team. We can consult with the community, but we need to prepare with program and a budget and the cost implications to take ownership of that. So that we can have the say as whether we ensure the asset and we have a maintenance program for that asset going forward.
It's good to highlight that it was an issue. Something being done to some things.
I should probably add, it's probably a bit early in the conversation. Right.
Well, at least we're having a conversation about something that last year we didn't really have a clue about. So, thank you.
Morris?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, perfect this time.
Oh, thank you. I have a question again in relation to grazing of sheep in the berms, which I understand what that refers to on page 27. And I wanted to ask if that is still planned, how is the grazing of sheep in river berms, which were set aside to not have stock in them, consistent with the national policy statement of freshwater and the need to reduce contaminants? And have the tangata whenua been involved at any stage? And a second question, is there consideration to widen the berms to allow, this is in the Whitestone, to allow the river to be restored to what it was prior to 1980, as shown by Ian Fuller at the gravel workshop? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chairman. So we'll start with the first question, if I can remember it. The trials also include cut and carry trials, so it's not just grazing. So they were brought about through the River Liaison Chairs meeting. It's something that came from the community. They wanted us to investigate it, which we're doing on their behalf. So there's an alternative methodology as opposed to just aerial spraying, which also comes with its own trials and not trials, challenges. It's very expensive, and the landowners, which aren't the landowners of the spraying area of spraying program, are funding the majority of that work. It's not sustainable for the local rating district to continue the same funding mechanisms. So it came about because there's not the local contributions from the likes of Dock and Linz that match the contributions from the landowners. So that's where it originated from. So Paul's been working on with the science team on what we can do to actually test it as a methodology to make sure we still comply with NPS, and that work's still ongoing. Second question is Ian Fuller has been working on this project with us, and beach skimming is the preferred methodology that we currently support as opposed to the habitat methodologies that have been in place for the last about 21 years. So with the outcome that we're trying to get with beach skimming is lower profile beaches that allow the slightly higher water levels and flood levels to sweep over, skim over them, keep them, stop them from building up, and helping us reduce the reliance on aerial spraying to keep weeds off them.
And I think Morris's third question was in connection with iwi.
So we're very early in the process of the discussion with stakeholders. We actually need to get the methodology and the way we're going to do it, we're going to engage properly with iwi and through this consenting the stakeholders process.
Thank you, Randall. I do note, however, that as far as consultation with iwi, that according to the national policy statement, really should be at the earliest stage possible before any, any decisions. Well, you won't have made a decision by then, but really involving them at an early stage to be consistent with that. So, but anyway, thank you for your reply. I'll keep asking questions about the grazing of sheep and berms until hell freezes over, as they say. But thank you for your reply.
Morris has made me forget the first question, but we'll come back to that. Actually, that trial's been going on quite some time, and it's about chief had to be fenced out of any waterway. Strategic, we were also doing a cut and carry, and we were doing the plantings, on the region. So these were a series of trials to try and see if we can get away from constantly displaying toxic materials on those things. It's probably also got an effect. So results of those trials are going to be ongoing. I remember what my original question was. It's
Power, trees.
territory. Probably wants to do it by our catch. I think we've got out of my head. I'll pass over if I remember the last time.
I think it was correspondence.
Yes.
Any other question? Yeah, little.
I have, but I'm kind of trying to open the can of words that it might be. The removal of high risk trees on the Waihakara River bank by North Road. Aware that they're gone, which is good. But where are we at with that community conversation and what might be able to be done? We have some concerns.
I'll let Randall, Randall, the removal of the trees is, like, or at least, there may be ongoing work, but that's certainly not planned next season, is it? I think that's probably a good starting point. The work's been completed, is that correct? To date?
Is ongoing high-risk tree removal program where through the fix maintenance program. So there is some of those being in places like that. So we will have a works program coming out next summer with similar outcomes. I think it's really important to note that we have genuine concerns from the community, and we need to be able to explain the reasons why and be better at doing that. But when we undertook those removal works at Gore, those trees were actually largely rotten in the middle and were genuine high risk to that community. So that is what we're trying to address.
So to answer yours, the primary question, we so through Randall and Fiona, I suppose, working together, we've engaged some of the more vocal residents, more active residents of the issue in a site meeting. We've gone away and looked at the issue. Isn't, I think the community accept the trees were posing a flood management danger, and I think that's well accepted. So I don't think we need to revisit that.
Yeah.
But certainly some of the challenges that have now arisen as a removal of trees around future potential of an area, lighting, noise, and dust. So we've endeavoured to have an ongoing conversation, but we're not the only potential agency in some fixes around that. I think ITT might also have a part to support. We haven't got any, I think, and maybe ask Fiona if she can add anything, but we've not got any actual planting solution say, because the difficulty of that particular area is the proximity of the boundaries to the stock bank. And so one of the reasons why the trees were made, they were in the wrong, effectively the wrong location. So we're still in the early stages of going back to that community with potential options to try and minimise the effect that the trees being removed has. So an ongoing conversation, probably a long way of saying what that's just saying.
Michael?
Well, just on that, and I guess with this funding available for coronation year, there are a few places around that where you can purchase quite mature trees. And I'm just wondering if we could do a bit of community work with identifying places and actually have some buy-in. Rips might actually like to buy one or two of those bigger ones that would actually solve some of the problems that would have to be done in conjunction with the ES to make sure it's the right tree in the right place. But I think some people are roughly saying these little trees are going to take 10 years to make any progress at all, but there may be a few other options out there.
Sorry, just one last question for you, Mr. Chair. With regards to beach skimming, we've had a couple of trials on the way, over the bridge and over the bridge. I've noted personally, I believe there are two different outcomes. One was operated under some sort of sensible guideline. The other one, there was some discrepancies, some overburdens sitting in the river corridor. Can that overburden be used for other aspects? Blood bank protection for local farmers. Relievable waterways, water.
Thank you, councillor. So I'll just quickly answer through you, Mr. Chair, and then ask Paul to talk to the specifics around the details. You know, Gravel's it's not black and white, it's very great. We actually have to probably do some work on education and explaining the risks and management options that we've got to the community and councillors and stakeholders. The mobilisation of gravel and floods is something that we can probably start to address and start sharing with the community. We bring in the likes of Ian Fitzgerald Fuller or Dr. James Brassenden and some lots of opinion pieces. Just because we have a gravel build-up doesn't mean it stays there during the flood. So we actually need to look into the risks of those gravel build-ups, and that's what happens during the flood. We're trying to address as well as the erosion issues that are being caused by those floods. So I'll ask Paul to just talk to you specifics.
The issue with the overburden, the Whitestone trial, we need to work with both Lindsay and Doc to sort out what to do with that particular material. We can use it on adjacent farms. We just know we can dispose of handy to the site. We are thinking to approach so they don't extort disposal sites and could be used for topping up flood banks or anything like this. And the trial work needs to progress into the actual work phase, I suppose you could say. So we need to develop a strategy that's going to be accepted for all the organisations going forward to what we do with this material.
Any other questions? On page 4, that we note the report. Someone like to move? No, Second Morris. Thank you, Morris.
Yeah.
Put the motion, those in favour say aye. Against no, it's agreed. Come to item 5, complex and progress group.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think the report is read and nothing to add. But welcome questions.
I think it's information quite specific context. Has anybody got any questions for? Paul?
I'd like to move.
Oh, well, that's a very good question. Can I see? No questions, no discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour say aye. Ready. Item 6, power catchment update, page 40 on your paper.
Thank you, Jeremy.
There we go.
Yes. Okay. Just loading a presentation. We're just loading a presentation.
Okay. Oh,
Short presentation.
very clear.
Today. So first of all, Erica is working in theme of harmony with the technology. So councillors might recall this and also the next item regarding the integrated management work plan. And so the intention is, will have been discussed in the next item, is to provide updates on other catchment projects and or topic-based issues in relation to integrated catchment management over the coming months. And I know there's a timetable included in the agenda. So today, I have a very short presentation around the Matoda catchment. So that is the catchment of interest for today. I think as time goes on, we will evolve these presentations and
what I suppose I would say to you, while we await the presentation, is that it is interesting when you start working, not only across the organisation, but into the community as well, the amount of work going on, the number of projects all going on. And so I hope into the future, this will be a useful place for councillors to get a sense of that, the extent of that work across the catchment from mountains to sea, but also the different agencies and groupings and individuals organization of work.
Good. How are we getting on with the technical stuff?
So what I might do is just
Talk us through it. We can visualize.
Okay, so right now we're picturing a beautiful picture of one of our staff kayaking in the upper reaches of the Matara. So again, as I said before, the whole sense of mountains to sea is really important in terms of this Matara conversation. Sort of the skills of being experienced with a campus conversation without noticing it's So very conscious, you know, if you think about Matara, we're right up in the headwaters of Matara, where some of you may enjoy fishing, right down to the southeastern extremity. We're involved, it's not the same catchment. The Waikawa is a catchment as part of the Matara FNU. So I'm talking about the freshwater management unit rather than just the specific catchment, because that's how we're thinking about our catchments going forward. So I really just, with that in mind, wanted to touch on what is this thing that we call integrated management and just anchor us in integrated management. Here we go. Beautiful picture. So what is integrated management through you, Mr. Chairman? So it is, how are we working in a holistic and integrated way? How are we connected? How are we working across the whole catchment FMU in terms of our land, our biodiversity, our water, our community resources, but with that context, which is so how are we working together across all of the different resource areas, if you like, land, water, biodiversity? How are we working across the catchment from the mountains to sea? We know that whole idea of future tie is actually fundamental and underpins a lot of the conversations we have in an operational space, increasingly so, but also from a Hauora and a plan change to a Tahi perspective. So Hauora being really important is what we are heading towards in terms of a healthy and resilient environment. And you'll see there that I've pointed to the regional forum recommendations, that connection of urban and rural as being really important. At the heart of this are the values and outcomes for mana whenua in our community. Te mana o te wai, again, is another key principle that comes at the heart of how we think about the work that we are doing across the Mataura catchment. And for that, as I said, everyone needs to play their part. So this is not just Environment Southland, and you know, this presentation and future presentations of this nature must, by definition, reference other projects going on, some that we might be involved in, some that we might be leading, and some that we might actually not be part of. So, and all of that, we want to have lead towards that goal of Hauora for the Mataura catchment. Just to touch on this, there was obviously a planning process last year. So we have, as part of the update that will come through Plan Change Tuatahi in the RPS, the freshwater vision. And again, that just really reinforces the concept of Hauora, that healthy resilience that we are heading towards for the Mataura by 2045. Again, that within a generation that we know is coming through very strongly in terms of the direction from central government. Just touching briefly from Bruce and his team, some of this that you'll probably be aware of, but the work going on in the consent space in the Mataura, the water conservation order, the water conservation order consent recalibration. So that is the work going on very closely with groups that we are involved with in terms of understanding the nature of the consents for water extraction in the upper mid-Mataura and the work that we had to do to in that space to update. Fonterra has applied to reconsent its wastewater and other consent requirements in terms of the Mataura River for the Edendale battery, because these consents are nearing expiry. And again, touching on this, but the intention of these getting forward is actually what is the connection
collection of things, not just in terms of land, but also industrial and community that we can talk about. Kawera Downs Wind Farm facility, so that's currently under construction, and I'm sure perhaps people who are living in that area are very, very familiar with that. And councils will appreciate there's been a number of wood grazing consents and DPAs, or decommitted activity statuses, that have been related to the Mataura catchment in particular. Perhaps this is a good time, just going to move on to talk about some of the catchment group work we're doing. But as I talk about winter grazing consents, councillors may have attended or be familiar with the field day recently that we also represented at, and the Waikaia, where they looked at the all grass wintering. So again, looking at a range of topics and providing support where needed, or being present at some of those events. And that obviously will certainly be well reported in the paper. Just really interesting learnings in terms of what might this mean for us in terms of a long-term mitigation. How might people transition in terms of their winter grazing practices? And I think there was some useful information shared with the community in that meeting. In terms of the catchment groups, we know that there is an interest in bringing together a collective type project similar to the Aparima in the Mataura. So the large number of catchment groups are, I believe, having a meeting next week. There is a catchment collective, and so that's something that we are peripherally involved in, but certainly quite interested in terms of helping plan out actions and ensuring that actually the work that our landowners are doing actually relates to some of the outcomes we need to achieve for the region. You'll be familiar with the Beyond Regulation projects. There's a number of field days underway at the moment. So landscape susceptibility mapping is really key to that. And then the match up with mitigations, a pretty strong linkage to the LiDAR work and a real opportunity for the LiDAR in that space. And I've just obviously a new group in Waikaia, so we've had a couple of meetings where we've been taking information to and shared information with the Waikaia group. I've worked with a number of these farmers in the past, and they are a highly motivated group of farmers who think very deeply, like many, about the topics, and are very open and interested to work more closely on some of the issues that we're all confronting. I've looked at a selection of field-based support. We work very closely with the two Private Southland facilitators in that catchment, and I'll come and hold of Satania and Tessa. And so we're working very closely with them. And I guess our challenge in working with them is just work programming and planning. So just quickly around the catchment scale projects, and I'm going to just sort of dance around a little bit here in terms of how I present this. Just on the right hand side, you'll see the Mataura catchment water story information. So, you know, one of the things that we need to think about when working with our community and with Mana Whenua is bringing those stories to our community of place-based, you know, what's happening across the space of the Mataura catchment. And so we have a website, actually, this is from our website, the Mataura Catchment's Water Story. And I just encourage you all to just have a wee look at that. It talks about the values and objectives work that was done and the work going on, and I'm happy to share a link to that. So if I can just talk briefly through this, and when I say catchment scale, some of these are very specific place-based, and some of these are across the whole catchment. But just to give you a sense across the board of some of the work going on from within the council. So if I start in the Upper Mataura, obviously we had a huge program of work through biodiversity around our wild and conifers, and that is work that continues and that we are still looking for support. We have coming south from there the Waimea project, so we're working with the Balfour Catchment Group. They're leading, it is a lead outside the organisation, but there's work going on there to look at testing edge of field mitigation, so wetlands, constructive wetlands and so forth. So the Waimea project, I think, is just starting to kind of really build some momentum, and we're really interested in our role in that will be around the mitigations. I'm just going to swing wildly right out to the edge, the edge of the Mataura FNU to the Waikawa, where we have conversations underway with the community, working in with some funding opportunities to create a catchment plan. So that will definitely be engaging with iwi, with other stakeholders and government agencies to build that. So that's actually a really exciting opportunity. Across the catchment, we are working alongside Reimagining Matoda. So that's a grouping that has come together to again have a really strong emphasis of LGBTI. And we're looking for opportunities how we can come alongside them in terms of the work that we're doing. Across the catchment, councils will know that we have our often controlled areas, so approximately 30, I believe, 180,000 hectares of the Matoda catchment, and ongoing fire control and pest control that happens in that catchment. And then just coming down into a little bit of detail, so a couple of things that obviously councils will be aware of the Lower Mataura LiDAR that's now available. I believe that's not been without its challenges, but the opportunity for LiDAR, both in terms of hazard planning, but very much also in terms of individual on-farm mitigations, is really exciting. And I suppose we are somewhat hampered by the pace at which we can get this delivered, but nonetheless, a whole lot of excitement in that space. And finally, we have a piece of work that we're currently attempting to scope up around the Waituna Creek erosion and extending what has been under the Whakamanati Waituna Lower Waituna Creek discussion, taking that across the catchment and looking at a more holistic way about how we actually across the different perspectives bring that together to help manage some of the erosion and sediment loss issues, which are very, very real and live in that catchment, but in truth, not just that catchment. And with that,
We'll take questions. Very comprehensive, shouldn't be any. But we will take them.
I acknowledge that this is the work
Just here, integrating that the Feds conference, the Sunday night we can separate this, and I'm assuming it is in that catchment. And it was waiting for the approval of we've managed to make any progress on that particular one.
through you, Mr. Chairman, that's an ongoing conversation. It's just I'm not sure if we have specifically gone back at this point, but certainly we've had a discussion. We'll work more closely with Evie around what's supported or how we work through that in the best way possible. So that's the consent feedback loop. And obviously, that was one particular example. So we need to consider the number of questions and consider in that space.
Good, right there, Morris.
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you. Just putting my mute off. No, that's very good. Thanks. Thank you, Fiona. I'm not sure about that kayaker and the fishermen being together in the same place. They probably wouldn't, fishermen might not be too happy about that, but overall, that's very good to hear. Thank you.
It occurred to me that might be on a par with the cyclist, Morris. Would you like to move the report, Morris?
Sorry, say that again.
Would you like to?
Yes, happy to move that report.
We haven't seen the. Put the motion over, say aye. Yes, no, that's great. Item 7, work plan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just as Fiona alluded to, we've introduced the Regional Service Committee our work plan. So if you turn to page 44, 45, you'll see that we should have the power report. These will be ongoing, and by the next committee meeting in August, there'll be an update on the wire catchment into your region at Parima. Also, as Fiona alluded to, we're going to do some activity updates. So things that are key across ICM, I suppose. And so we'll keep updating them. And thank you to Councillor Rodway. We got some of our dates the wrong way round at the last report. So we've attempted to make sure that they're aligned with regional services committee dates. So thank you, Councillor Rodway, for spotting the mistake last time.
Information and value. Thank you. So any questions? We will. Okay, here's moving that report. Nicole, second Paul. Motion, those in favour say aye. No, that's B. We have an apology from Phil. No conservation. Verbal update. We else have got one. I've been notified of any ordinary areas of business. But we do have some publicly excluded. So we've got a rationale why we might want to do that.
Yeah, enable any local authority holding information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage to activities and to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons.
Thank you. So we have someone here to move us. Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Second, Paul. Anything onto it?
Just have a signal that we're no longer streaming.
We need to keep Morris on board, but exclude everybody else.